What's up, you radical human? Welcome back to the show. Today, I talked to Christian Van Camp, also known as CVC Wellness online, all about what it means to be a high testosterone man living in his creative purpose. But this isn't just for the men. There's lots of value here because what we're talking about is the human conundrum. So we talk about all kinds of stuff. Christian's healing story and what he's going through currently with his family and some ill health issues and how you move through those with grace and find some purpose in that. How do you actually find purpose in life? What are the top traits of a high value human, a high testosterone man? Why he thinks that raw meat could be the answer to some of the ailments of modern living, and what is really going on in our culture that is robbing us of our most valuable asset, which is our attention. How to detox from that dopamine and that constant grab for our awareness. So it's really fun. Christian's very refreshing, very high energy, and I think you're gonna like this one. And that's all we got. Let's get into the show. Christian, welcome to the show, my friend. If our audience are on Instagram, they might have seen your beautiful, bright, long-haired face popping up all over the place these days. You seem to be blowing up in the best possible way, sharing a very aligned message. So I'm super excited to chat with you. But I must know where you're calling from today, because it seems you've gone Mr. International on us. You're all over the place these days.
Yeah, man. So I'm in this vortex hemisphere area on Sayulita, Mexico.
And where were you before that?
Yeah, dude, I've been residing in Arkansas, a small town in Arkansas, Fayetteville, Arkansas, for about 5 years. I transitioned there after going through some epiphanies, living in St. Louis, Missouri my whole life. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make that transfer to University of Arkansas, studied holistic nutrition and kinesiology, and then realized that I didn't fully agree with a lot of the teachings of the FDA, USDA, et cetera. And so that led me into really starting my entrepreneurial passions online, in which we're talking about right now. You're seeing my face everywhere type energy. So.
Right. I mean, for me, I grew up in the northwest of England. It was kind of like a sleepy little working class town. I always felt this need to like spread my wings, if it will, and move out. I'm curious, Missouri and Arkansas, I would just say, I'm not an American, I don't know, but I would say there's not too much holistic health going on in those spaces. So how's this journey continuing to unfold, and kind of where was your epiphany or waking up moment where you was like, all right, I gotta spread my wings and fly too?
Absolutely, man. And I think that's a big part of what actually inspired me, is the quote unquote negatives inspired me towards the positives of natural health, natural living, and connecting with nature, all the simplicity away from some of the big conglomerate energy we're around typically in all these cities like St. Louis, or even some of the southern areas where Arkansas resided with, Walmart. Bentonville, Arkansas, Walmart was created in that town. And so Tyson Foods with all the chicken factories based in that town. So these are things that I was living in, and at the same time, there was some rural energy, so I saw a lot of cow pastures, and there was a lot of beauty when it came to the forestry. But growing up, I've had a lot of health issues when it comes to my personal health, with gut troubles, getting involved in a lot of dopamine imbalances, we could say, with pornography, with fast food, with going out with friends and drinking alcohol, distractions galore. And then also my extended family, my personal intimate family, has had a lot of health issues as well. And so that got me down into this, okay, I do not need to go down towards this synthetic sickness, nor do I want to help. I want to help everyone else move away from that trajectory towards this natural living. So, made some big strides, man. Started researching a ton about like just protocols to really enhance my family's life and my own. And over the years, it just grew into this massive passion project that I'm just living and breathing on. So yeah, and a lot of extensions coming from it, but that's the basics.
For sure, man. I think that's what people really enjoy, particularly about your messages, the kind of along for the ride. And I think you do a really good job of talking about that journey of kind of growing up and becoming a man, an integrated man, a high team man. And now you kind of lead men in learning how to be a men's leader, a men's coach. You talked a lot about being a vape god and, these dopamine behaviors. Vape lord, okay. And, just cheap dopamine and drinking and partying and like these pseudo things that we chase trying to feel alive. And these days, being much more in touch with nature and the natural way of things. I think you say that, your relationship to nature is almost above all else. So what is that journey like from you? Who was you, 5, 10 years ago, maybe, whatever that's been like? And what is the fundamental differences between this kind of integrated man versus that immature boy?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and I had a great family life. I was really connected with my family. My parents were great teachers, great support system for me. We were always outside playing. We always got a lot of sun. They did a really good job growing us up, but it was just like a typical, standard American lifestyle in the suburbs of St. Louis. And, there was just a lot of these epiphanies that happened within my family that led me personally down this health path. Many of which started with my older sister, Courtney. She was in the Marines for many years, post 9/11, 2001, 2002, around that time. She was blown off a 50-foot plus wall in Afghanistan from either grenade, or she just got blown off landing these wires. At the time, they wouldn't use a lot of the wireless communication, so she had to lay down all these wires, got blown off, shattered her clavicle, had this intense pain. All this surgery had to be done, so she was deployed back into the US, and going through all these different prescriptions of heavy opiates, right? And so most individuals that are prescribed opiates don't get off it, or they end up bleeding into more heavy ways to numb the pain, which includes things like heroin. And so she was really struggling for many years throughout my youth with heroin addiction, stealing, fighting, alcohol abuse. I remember just seeing grand mal seizures from Courtney and whatnot. And she's doing much better today. She's doing great today, but there's just so many of these things that just amplified in microdoses throughout my childhood that led me into this path through just like, whoa, this does not need to be this way. Like, we do not need to be handing out medications like candy. And these were all things that rose up out of high school. Like, I didn't really see that until later on. And all the fighting is so unnecessary, the alcohol abuse, all that stuff, right? It's just deep-rooted traumas that can be addressed firsthand versus avoided. And there's other layers to this as well. My little sister Nina was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. So basically, this is like a 3-chambered heart. And so we usually have our 4 chambers, the atrium, the ventricles, pumping blood really well. But she had this heart issue to where was constantly in and out of the hospital with multiple procedures every single year throughout her youth, having stents put in, and just I can't even imagine like having your heart tampered with throughout your young ages. And she's a few years younger than me, but eventually in March of 2014, she had a heart transplant because she was in the hospital for 3 months having high pneumonia. We thought it was just going to be a typical time going back to the hospital, but they were like, no, she's going to pass if she doesn't have a new heart, right? And so by the grace of God, this is what opened up my whole world, man, is like, I love modern science. I love modern medicine. Without Nina, without Courtney, they wouldn't be here today. But there's this side of things where we're enhancing that way too much. And I'm so passionate about like, where's the sweet spot of integrating some of these philosophies and modalities from modern medicine to find that balance and kickstart back into natural healing instead of relying on these toxic things, or they eventually become toxic because they're overdone. So without Nina, she wouldn't be here today. So she's had a new heart for 10 years now, but she's still having a lot of gut troubles, heart issues, low energy. So just seeing some of these negatives throughout my youth, I've converted them, man. I've just been able to convert them into these positive triumphs. And it's been a real big challenge, but it's also been one that's a part of my journey in helping others. So,
yeah. And I think you make a good point there. It's not to throw all the baby out with the bathwater and say, just because nature can heal us and the wisdom lies in the way of understanding where we came from and where we're going and living more by those laws, that it doesn't mean that there's no space for modern medicine, because they can be absolute miracle workers. I've had staph infections and MRSA in the past, and without those antibiotics, I probably wouldn't have a leg right now, or worse. So I'm very grateful in that sense. But, chronically, I think for what a lot of people are experiencing, it's not the be all and end all. And I think something that is really more important is these holistic lifestyle factors. So in your perspective, like kind of having that perspective of both of these worlds, why do you think, or what is it about this connection to the more natural order of things that is so important and so grounding and so healing for people?
I mean, I think it's just, it's worshiping simplicity. I got really big into Stoicism many years, started reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. If you haven't read that book, just go into that. That's the archives of the most profound journals 2,000 plus years ago from this great Stoic philosopher, Marcus Aurelius. And there's also some other texts I dove into with like Seneca and whatnot. But ultimately, there's an overall theme that comes up with these great philosophers is worship simplicity. Don't add on more, eliminate to find freedom. It's about simplifying. It's about not adding more and more and more. Like we see with these biohackers nowadays, like Brian Johnson, mad respect for what he's doing with all his analytics and, whatever he's doing to live a longer life with his genes and whatever, the biology. But ultimately, that's an obsessive there's a certain area we're going too far in, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're moving away from nature with his things, where he's not talking about sun exposure. He's not talking about God. He's not talking about any of these things that I strongly believe in are real longevity hacks. You know, being the little woman who's 105 in Sardinia, Italy, who just smokes cigarettes all day, but she has community and she has, you know, powerful relationships. She gets sun all the time. She walks often. She grounds barefoot on the beach, right? She breathes deeply. She has passion projects and yin practices. This is longevity. It's not about all the crazy technological hacks. Like, that's trying to overlap the problem, right, at hand, which is really just sitting with yourself. So that's where I've gone through it all, man. I remember like geeking out on this stuff out of high school. I was like 17, 18. I started this whole journey, and I was buying all these supplements online that were being shilled left and right, testing out all these things for like energy and mitochondria and whatever, and just learning this stuff, realizing that they have maltodextrin and random fillers and shit in it, right? But it was all like trying to hack my way out of why I had low energy or gut issues or whatever, when really it could have just been eliminating some of the breads, eliminating the alcohol, eliminating the vapes, eliminating poor relationships and friends that are distracting, and then integrating after the elimination some of just the basic simplifications of health. Mm-hmm. So that's where my passion erupts, is like really helping men, especially in this world, realize that you don't need the next Andrew Huberman protocol. You just need to just focus on getting sunlight, walking often, and sitting and ponder maxing. I like to say, just ponder.
Love that.
Sit without your phone, like no distractions. Because that's been my journey, and I know that can heal a lot of men too.
Yeah, it's really good, man. I think, you know, speaking of Andrew Huberman, he just launched that he's writing a new book, or it's published
His
now.
book, yeah.
It's called Protocols. Yeah. And I think, yeah, this almost
respect,
like
whatever. Yeah.
Exactly, but he's trying to apply some kind of parameters around mostly the natural things again. You know, he's really popularized maximizing daylight sunlight for circadian rhythms, right. And essentially, if you're living more by the laws of nature, you just do that. It's just an aspect of your being. It's less of the human doing, more of the human being. It's more natural. And I think something, you know, that you said, which is, I think we share a mentor in Paul Chek. He always pushes back on this biohacking terminology and says, I much prefer bio-harmonizing. Like, some of these things are additive and they're great, but let's not supersede them via, you know, not first going to nature. So yeah, ground first, and have a grounding mat and sheets if that's your thing, but make sure you're putting your bare feet in the grass. You know, if you want a red light, they're awesome, but also make sure you're getting the sunlight and getting the natural light first. And I think this is just a way of understanding the innate wisdom and healing power of the simple things. So that's a really good segue into a question what I wanted to ask you about. You said you were a little bit dopamine distracted, dopamine addicted, and in a world where our attention is being pulled left, right, and center, and everything is cheap dopamine, and everything is a distraction or a hack or a new sexy shiny object. How do you prioritize this stillness, this simplicity, and probably more importantly, how do you teach other people to do this in this hyper-connected, very busy, distracted world?
Okay, yeah, I'll preface with the fact that I work on my computer, I work on my phone, right? I am consistently on these devices to provide information, and that's the caveat to all of this. Is I believe you can use these devices far more than the average human and feel fulfilled, energetic, and even more healthy because your mindset's in a better place by overlapping consumption with creation. Ultimately, that's the ultimate like focal point for, I believe, everyone. If you're listening to this, like, focus on how can you create whenever you open your phone, not how can I consume. If you just change that way you perceive these devices, your whole life will improve in so many facets. Because I'm on my phone a lot. I can imagine you are too. But you're constantly finding ways you can create a message. You can create an email thread. You can create a response. You can create a response to your clients and helping them out. You can create a piece of content. You can create a podcast and speaking with your vocal cords versus consuming other people's vocal cords, right? So I think that is the key, is getting in the mindset that you already know a ton of information. We already have so much information overload. We know this as a fact that we're seeing 100,000 times the information than our grandparents 100 years ago. This is like all fact stuff. So if we go back into how can I just focus on what I know already and just creating that, it's huge. So like just recently, I'm making a big shift in my business model where I'm still helping men with their health. I'm helping them with their vitality, but I'm making a big shift in what I've learned over the past 4 to 5 years as a content creator to help other coaches help other coaches land clients through their content strategy, help coaches build up their email list, build up their funnels, all these different things that I've learned over the years, because that is so gratifying for me to help almost spread that power to individuals that are doing the same as what I have done. So the reason I bring that up is the writer's block, you can call it, a lot of these individuals experiences. I don't feel comfortable behind the camera, or I don't feel comfortable, like doing this. It's like, yeah, of course you don't, because you've never done this before. If you really look at the whole, what is the word that we always say? It's like when you feel like you're not sufficient enough to speak on something. What is that? Like the there's a word for it where, yeah, it's like an incompetence thing where it's like, I'm not actually in the position to be able to talk about this. It's where there's a word for it. Maybe some of you guys know. But basically the whole core of that is that, where it's, I wish I knew the word because it'd make this a lot more simplistic, but imposter syndrome, boom, it just came to me. I just channeled it from the ether.
There you go.
But imposter syndrome, we hear this all the time. Like, oh man, I don't know if I can really help people with coaching, or I don't know if I can make content. Well, duh, you don't, because you've never done it before. This is the whole point in life, is getting curious and learning about it. Then you'll feel comfortable. So it's a practice like anything else. And I think the whole core of me bringing all this up is getting into the mindset, how much can I create for the world on these little devices? We have social media at our fingertips, and we can create an online business through this completely free. You don't even have to have like a payment system for Instagram or Facebook. It's like open to the public. You can create a profile, and start sharing information, and then getting clients and calls booked and building up, an ebook selling, whatever it is, a course. Like, you can make a living doing this stuff. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. So creation over consumption is the dopamine cure, I find.
I think that's wonderful. And I think if anybody really resonates with that, Rick Rubin's latest book, The Creative Act, is really powerful. And I think you'd resonate with a lot of that. And Rick Rubin's kind of this like mad scientist, came from the music scene, but he talks about this, this just kind of innate desire for us to create, and we create, and, women create life. They create all the life, and we partake in that. But men, we usually create with our hands, whether we're building these bodies, or we're building these businesses, or we're building these communities. And I think there's something really powerful in that. And when you mentioned imposter syndrome, it also reminded me of the kind of case in our culture of credentialism, that we listen to these evidence-based people, or only the gods in our culture, which are basically doctors, the white lab coats, the all-knowing, all-powerful. And we share a bit of a message that you could almost say it's a double middle finger to the system, really. It's almost like a 180. We say, actually, sunshine can be really good for you, and red meat is actually healthy, and even raw meat can be good for you. Like all of these mainstream narrative breakers. And I think that, what really is a person's credentials when they get into this is how many people they can actually help. And I think what you've now got is the confidence that, like, hey, I didn't know, now I do, that I've helped, dozens or hundreds of men along the way reclaim their health. And therefore, like, why aren't those credentials as important as somebody that just has a title of something they learned in a school and that was, coerced and co-opted by pharmaceutical industries, et cetera, et cetera. All to say, what are some of the biggest things that you teach men? Like, somebody comes to you, they see this, high T man, they want to grow up, they want to actualize their potential. Where do you start somebody? What are some of maybe the top 3 healthy tips for somebody to really maximize or think about to start being on that trajectory of healing themselves?
Biggest thing today is circadian dysfunction. I think once these individuals, all individuals, optimize when is blue light exposure and when is sunlight exposure and when is no light exposure. Once you get all those things down, your whole life improves immensely, right? So this means waking up, doing your best to wake up with the sun, go to bed with the sun in that type of format, turning off all blue light, clicking on the red lights or candles after sunset, and then going to bed before 11 p.m., before 10 p.m. even. And having that consistent circadian clock is like the ultimate longevity support, like an ultimate energy support. It's going to help all facets of life. So I think that's number one right there, is just really optimizing those habits around light exposure. Another thing is really just focused on getting these healthy fats in, as we all know, like the seed oils, the industrial fats, the trans fats. Any of these processed fats are so inflammatory. They're going to cause a whole heaping amount of energy depletion and hormone dysfunction issues. You're going to have thyroid plummet. You're going to have all sorts of things holistically. You're literally putting like gasoline in your body. You can look at it as like you're dousing that unflavored gasoline in your body. Just do your best to shift into the stable saturated fats. We all know the animal fats are great and they're superior. You can also opt for things like coconut oil and like some really good quality extra virgin olive oil. That's my belief on this. I know Paul Saladino would beg to differ, but I strongly believe in a pure extra virgin olive oil that's cold pressed within the past 6 months. You can get access to that. It's going to be $50 a bottle. Sorry, but that's medicine. So I think that's a big one, right? Fats are so important. I think they help detoxify the body. I know they help detoxify the body. They emulsify toxins. They help get it out. Proteins build and are anabolic. And then you have carbs, which more so fuel up the energy source and reservoirs within our body. So that's another one right there with nutrition. We had the light exposure. Last but not least, man, it's just, you don't even need to bust your ass in the gym all the time. My philosophy is 3 days a week, sometimes even 2. And a lot of guys that join my program, they're like, dude, I don't understand how you're working out 3 to 2 days a week and you're getting results. And I'm like, well, because you're focusing on almost like a Mike Menser routine where less is more again. We go back to simplicity here. It's not about going to the gym 5+ days out of the week, hitting these hard, heavy intensity, like very, very challenging on the nervous system workouts that over time degrade your longevity pathways. And they also degrade your overall energy because you're just in such a destructive, non-anabolic, catabolic phase, right? Because when you break down tissue, it requires a lot more energy to come in. So if you're not resting and sleeping good, tying that to the circadian clock, you're not eating healthy, and you're working out 5 days a week, you're fucking yourself up big time. So I think 2 to 3 days a week is a great way to go. Heavy and hard, 45 minutes, you're good to go. And then just move consistently outside of that. Like just go on walks. I said the simplest thing is if you have 3 meals a day, go on 3 10 to 15 minute walks after your meals. Make that a trigger mechanism. Stack the habit with it, right? So those are 3 fastest, man. Movement, nutrition, and light exposure. Like just simple things we've been talking about that get in the headspace too of the mindset of like, make it simple. Don't tell yourself it is hard, because you're going to make it hard by even telling yourself that. So I think for a lot of people, just telling yourself it's easy will make it easy, right?
Yes, absolutely. I truly believe that thoughts become things. When you have a little negative belief that's kind of co-opted your psyche and you're feeling like a worthless human, you will act like a worthless human. I'm a parent now. If I do something and it's reactionary and it's not my best self and I'm like, oh, I'm a bad dad, it makes me more likely to be a bad dad, because I'm like almost making a statement of truth. And we've got to be very, very aware of our self-talk, because no, I'm not a bad dad. I'm not a bad human. I made a mistake. I can learn from that. And I have to always choose the more positive approach, because those thoughts will become things. But you said something there I think is really important to harp on a little bit, which is, if people have seen you on Instagram, CVC Wellness, or go and see you on Instagram, you're a good, like a lean, carrying a lot of muscle. And to hear somebody say, 2 to 3 workouts a week can get you there, as long as you're, hitting the right lifts and pushing the intensity on those days that you work out. Well, that probably means that another facet of your teaching is trying to like optimize hormones, right? Optimize testosterone. So I imagine that that's because you have, good hormonal balance, that you're able to stay lean year round. You're able to have a good amount of muscle mass. What are some of the top habits for being a high testosterone man?
This one's a little bit more like less common. People don't talk about this enough, man. It's really a huge issue in our society. Detoxification strategies. I think just overall focusing on holistic detoxification. This includes getting out anything that is not meant to be in your body. Heavy metals, cadmium, arsenic, lead, et cetera. Mold exposure, very common. I'm getting out of a mold exposure issue myself. My thyroid, I had like hypothyroid issues going on during the time I had the peak of mold exposure. It really tanks your thyroid function. So that's something I personally experienced, is just disrupting all my hormones by having mold exposure. So getting mycotoxins and mold out of the body. This also includes through diet, like getting the wrong coffee beans or getting the wrong peanut butter. Like that stuff is going to be contaminated as well in mycotoxins. Detoxing microplastics. That one's a little bit more tricky, but because, you saw probably the study of it being in the balls, right? The testicles of 23 out of 23 men had microplastic levels in their balls. That's crazy, right? So I can guarantee a lot of us, even today, eating the cleanest diet, limiting plastic use, even after 3, 4, 5 years I've been doing this, I'm still probably having microplastics in my system. It takes a while to detox. Be patient with that. But microplastics, forever chemicals, they're called forever chemicals. So, shit, that's going to be a challenging one to get out of the body. But, limiting things like nonstick pans, a bunch of other things that are in your environment, getting rid of any VOCs, volatile organic compounds. This could very well be just the couch you're sitting on. You sit on it, invisible shoots up, and these little invisible contaminants you're breathing into your nose. They're settling down on everything in the house. Pets, right? Pets are known to have some types of stuff. So these are all contaminants that aren't meant to be in our bodies. And so if we get really hyper focused on how can I optimize detoxification as numero uno out of all the things, that is going to help us when it comes to hormonal balance, boosting testosterone, boosting energy, boosting that overall vitality holistically. So I think that's a key component right there, is just putting that as a low hanging fruit.
I know we're both a fan of the nads too, and that's part of what you
Yeah.
just said, like removing microplastics from clothing and these PFOAs and things
Good
like that.
call.
And, just either freeballing it or thinking about what you put on your nads and protecting the boys. I think there's so much that we can go in, but I think you're hitting something there that's really important, which is if you're effectively detoxing by sweating daily and limiting the amount of the nasty stuff coming in, the hormones are supposed to naturally default to be, high energy and high state. If they're not,
Mm.
it indicates that something is going on at a root level, and we've got to find it. And it could be so many things, from the food to the plastics to the blue light and all those things that you said. So you just have to be, aware of that stuff, which is easier said than done in a world that feels quite sick and feels quite poisoned. But again, I guess the mentality that you take around that just empowers you, as opposed to being victim to all of those. You can become victor over them, and really try to take some of your power back.
I like how you bring that up, actually, real quick.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, like, not even just detoxing physical body, because that is such a 3D plane thinking. Detoxing your mind, that's like next level stuff. So like detoxing any sort of things you're watching consistently that are putting in implantations of horror or gore or just destruction or fear, any of those things. Remove that from your mind. A lot of that stuff is saturated on Netflix, it's saturated in Hollywood. Remove that stuff from the mind, and do your best to also remove anything you're listening to when it comes to music, like rap lyrics and a lot of trash music is so common today. Like those frequencies are messing you up, even if they aren't even bad lyrics. Like those frequencies that are mainstream typically are infiltrated by nefarious energy. So just like eliminate that, sit in peace more, sit in quiet, don't watch TV as much. Like simple ways right there to detox the mind, which also completely affects your hormones, right? Because if you're in that fight or flight response, testosterone is going to go down, right, from adrenaline. So
yes, I heard recently someone said something along the lines of, your physical body is made up of what you put in your mouth, and your spiritual, emotional body is what you put in your eyes and ears. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Because exactly like you said, you can spend your free time ponder maxing and thinking about lives and looking at trees and being grateful, or you can spend it doom scrolling or looking at butts or anything else. And I think you've got to really think about holistically. The impact of your diet is so much more than food. It's everything that's coming in. And I think that's a really good point. And it's probably a point that comes up a lot for you. I'm very curious about this because you're working with men. I imagine there's a broad spectrum of men in there, but I imagine you kind of appeal to the younger man that's trying to find themselves a little bit as well, and trying to kind of, find this like-minded community and such. What do you think is some of the biggest struggles that you hear most consistently from the men you work with? What are they really struggling with, and why are modern men having such a hard time with things like mental health and just their physical health in general?
I think a lot of it starts with creating purpose versus trying to find purpose. It's that mentality shift right there. I don't think God hands us on a silver platter, hey, this is your purpose, you're born with this, have fun. It's like, no, actually, we have to be able to hunt through within ourselves and go through all these caves. And then all of a sudden we find the gold mine, and then we can pull that out. And that's how it works. But it's a lengthy process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of introspection. It's a lot of removing these distractions that we just talked about. We listed a whole bunch of this stuff. I think that's a part of it. Also, I think it's related to merging that with the aspects of consistency. A lot of the men I work with is the idea of yo-yoing, right? They're like, dude, I'm like actually doing all these things you preach for like 2 weeks or a week or a couple days, and then it just falls off, and I keep going back to these same habits. And I'm like, ooh, interesting. I used to have that too for a chapter in my life before, like integrating it almost completely with the habits of nutrition and tech use and whatever. So I understand where that's coming from. So I think it's like this yo-yo effect, this lack of purpose or creating purpose, merging together. That's been a major issue. And foundational support systems for that. Like, what are some actual applicable ways to work through that? Well, ultimately, it is going back to ponder maxing. It's sitting with yourself. And I would say just whip out the journal and put down on the journal a list of all the things that you are naturally good at, that naturally comes easy to you. Just list out, brain dump it. Another thing you can list out is what is some things that put me in the flow state or the zone. And that might overlap with that, but what are some things that put me in that flow state? List all those things out. Okay, cool. What are some things that I enjoyed as a child? What are some activities I enjoyed as a child? I was just captivated into, and my parents didn't know why, but I was just like into these things. What was just naturally a part of my essence when I was young? Because that inner child's a huge part of your purpose. Putting that down, list all those things down. And then how can you merge all these concepts and answers to these questions with something greater than yourself? Not just focused on me, something what the Stoics call a sympatheia. So it's basically the concept of what hurts the hive hurts the bee, right? So how, or more so related to like all of collective consciousness is connected. So what I'm thinking right now, after we close off this Zoom call, Steve, you're going to be still connected with me, right? Or even just that little lady down in the Mexican shop down the street. Somehow I've never met her before. I don't even know what she looks like, but I'm connected to her on this collective consciousness. That's universal logos, or just God itself, capital G, God. So I think connecting all these parts of what comes natural to me, what activities did I enjoy as a child, what puts me in the flow state, and merging those into a God, into one ultimate universal God, allows you to feel like, wow, I'm actually bigger than what I think I am. I'm not just this ant walking on this big ball, or firmament, whatever we want to call it. And then I'm able to actually make some changes with, connecting with God or something greater than myself, because moving away from the egotistical me allows you to really transcend the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are some key aspects to work through. And then just getting clear with, some of the things we just discussed as well, relating to merging that, which is with some just like simple applicable habits, things that can get you started to boosting your energy so you can start heading towards where you want to go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It reminds me of a quote from Adam Lane Smith. He's a psychologist that works a lot in marriage counseling and men in particular. And he said, the quote was, "If you give a man a purpose, he will crawl over broken glass with a smile to make it happen." And I think that speaks to something in us, particularly as men. I do think we are purpose-built creatures. And I think that then, if that is the case, when we don't feel this sense of purpose, it's incredibly isolating, it's lonely, and then we are more likely to go and find a pseudo purpose in something else. And that's, drinking or chasing girls or pornography or
my team sport, my sports,
team,
or something.
Right. I'm really good at video games. Look, I'm an absolute G in this video game world, dude, but it's it's a proxy for what we really do want and crave, which is something like purpose. And I think, the importance of kind of slowing down and opening yourself up and asking those questions and getting curious and really thinking about, what did I enjoy and where did I lose that along the way? And, I became an adult, and I don't know, man, as I'm getting older and older, I just think that adults don't really exist. We're still all just kind of faking it until we make it. And we're still, little children trying to find our way home in some way, shape or form. And I think it's a very useful frame that you said about just understanding that you do have a role here. You do have a purpose. You did choose this, and everything that you do does matter. Even if it's something as simple as like looking the person that you interact with in the eye. And I have this, personal frame that I think is really useful, which is just try to leave everything better than you found it, including people, including places. If I see litter on the beach, I'm going to try and pick it up. And you look at a beach full of litter and you're like, well, what's the point, man? There's 2,000 pieces of trash on this beach. You couldn't possibly make a difference. And it's like, well, at least I'm trying, and then that gives me purpose. And then that leads to the next little breadcrumb, and then the next one and the next one. And I think you're right. I don't think I don't think you find your purpose as much as it finds you by living that way, by living in alignment, trying to get healthy, trying to do better, trying to be better, trying to love people, and trying to navigate through the hardships of life with as much grace as you can. Which brings me to my next point, which gets more into the mental alchemy side of things, which I think is really important. But how do you transcend challenges? I know you're going through a tough thing and you've been through tough things with seeing people close to you that are sick and, wrestling with that. How do you turn suffering into grace? How do you move through something that feels unjust and unfair? How do you teach people like some kind of mental alchemy to take the challenges of life and transcend them and go beyond them, even if they are really difficult?
I was telling you a little bit before we hopped on here and recorded, is just like, getting out of the thinking mind, however that can be, I think I say again this one, but really getting out of the thinking mind is really beneficial, and getting back into the being, the body, the yin, the feminine, you could call it. That is such a good way to really understand, where you're going in life and feeling more confident, especially through moments of turmoil or haste or sickness or just devastation of any form. It's way easier to work through challenges when you aren't recurring or negative feedback looping thoughts. I have been through a lot of troubles in my life in the past about what you mentioned just earlier about your children. It's like, having like a mistake you made, are you going to continue to recycle and just rekindle that same flame that is actually causing you a lot of shame and guilt? Or are you going to do your best to change the energy and shift it and move it in the right direction, which is more towards love and grace and peace and joy? How can you do that, right? And that there's a lot of alchemy that goes on during that process. And it's a very individualistic thing. So I don't have like a one-way thing that will help people. But in my experience, it's been really just like shutting the laptop, putting the phone away, moving away from EMFs, moving away from anything synthetic, and going back into nature, however it may be. Even if it's just like you're in an area that is industrial, you're in the city right now. Let's say you only have a little small park near you, or maybe you only have one single tree with a patch of grass. Great. Take advantage of that. That is nature. That is always going to be something that humans can create and change in a way that is, it's innately how God created it, right? We didn't, with these mics and all this stuff was crafted by hand through God, but like that is ultimately like connecting right back to God, capital G God, we were talking about, right? In my eyes. So I think, getting back into any form of nature is like the best healer. Go into the beach, just walk, go back to the pond or maxine. Like that's how I get through a lot of these challenging moments, because if I get back into thinking mind, I'm like, okay, what do I do to help my sister? Like she's suffering. It's like, that's a sense of control. Why am I trying to control something that I have no control over? That is a very unfortunate way to live life, is trying to control things you don't have control over.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us in our culture are always trying to do this. And so it's unfortunate. So that's one of those things that I find, like going back into nature and not trying to control everything is key.
Yeah, the aptly named book, The Surrender Experiment, rings true for me there. It's Michael Singer's book. It's a really cool and profound book. It's just like trusting whatever is coming up is, as hard as this may be, exactly as it's supposed to be, because it is this way. And when we get into our heads and argue but there's so much unjust stuff in the world, and it's so hard. It is. Nobody's denying that, but there has to be some level of acceptance with what is, because if we can't accept it and then adopt to it and move through it consciously, then we just resist it, and what you resist persists, and where your energy goes is what you'll magnify, and that will grow, and you just burn out, man. And I think that nature holds the answers. It's been very similar for me, so whether that's going putting my bare feet in the grass or getting some sun or something like that, it's usually something that is grounding to the body, grounding to the spirit, and allows you to just take a breath. It's certainly not trying to numb the problems away with drink or alcohol or screen time, because you're not working through that laundry that you need to work through. So nature, we've mentioned it a bunch. I'm very curious about your relationship to nature as you connect to it through the sun and the earth and grounding. What are some of the practices that you've really leaned into there? And sun is a very contentious topic. You like to chronically be tanned, as do I. Are we destroying?
I have no tan lines. That's the goal.
Yeah. Are we destroying ourselves? Are we accelerating aging? Are we giving ourselves cancer, all for this vanity metric of being tan? Or is maybe that giant fireball in the sky, the giver of life, something that is healthy? What do you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's it, man. Right there. It is a giver of life, like all life on earth. I wouldn't be able to see right now if it weren't for light energy. So that alone says, like, we are literally creating a vortex through our eyeballs to see this stuff around us, right? It's literally created through light energy, through that ball in the sky. If it is a ball, who knows what it is? Maybe it's just like a freaking like total tunnel of energy. Like, we don't really know what anything is in the universe. We hear like Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about, everything is 500,000 million years like away. It's like, how do we know these numbers? How do we know these telescope pictures from NASA are real? How do we know that the moon is real? I always question everything.
Mm-hmm.
But my whole point of questioning everything leads me into the whole point of the sun is healing, because I question what we have been sprayed upon, no pun intended, with all of the suntan, creams and lotions and stuff over the years, loaded up in benzenes, oxybenzones, and toxic chemicals that have actually been banned by the FDA, like banana boat and whatnot. In recent years. And so, like, if we just connect back to nature, we can realize, okay, actually a simple tallow-based zinc, sunscreen is great. I use it on my face to avoid like wrinkling in the future or whatever. Sunspots are not necessarily super normal. So if you're getting a lot of sunspots, there's a form of oxidation in the body, and there's melanocytes that are overreactive and forming patches in the body. So if you're getting sunspots or you're burning easily, it all starts with detoxing these seed oils we first talked about, getting the healthy fats in the body, getting cholesterol up in healthy ways. All that stuff will help with the relationship with the sun, right? It's not about saying something's good or bad in life. It's about saying how much, how often, the dose is the poison type
Mm-hmm.
energy, and what is the relationship with it.
Mm-hmm.
I could beg to differ though on something like pornography, like eliminate that from your life, right? But something for like, alcohol. I don't drink alcohol really at all. Like maybe every 3 to 4 months, I'll just come up with a function. I love a good tequila. I love a good mezcal every once in a while. It's awesome. It's a lot of fun. It opens my heart. I have 2 to 3 shots. I'm great. Like, I'm good. Is alcohol bad? No, it's not. I wake up just fine the next day because I had a good relationship with it, right? Is cannabis bad? Is it estrogenic? Is it going to be causing you to get feminized? Is it going to cause you to all these lower testosterone? No, I don't believe that. I think it's about like, what's the relationship with the cannabis? Is it every day throughout the day with some shitty heavy metal cannabis? Or is it with like once a week or every 3 days, you hit it a little bit in the evening, you have some creative flow, play some music, your intentions are good. That's going to enhance your life. That's going to enhance your longevity. So I think with everything going off of the sun, it's all about like that ricocheting balance spectrum of things. And once we move away from this is good and this is bad, we start to realize that everything in the universe is innately love. If we just like, that's kind of woo woo, but it's like, dude, that's so grounded in how I reality nowadays. Except for like masks and stuff, I don't believe those are really good. I don't think things like there's certain things in the the broad spectrum of what I believe that are like, okay, that's not good. That's not good at all. But that's just a joke saucing in there. But ultimately, that's it.
No, I think there's a lot of truth in that, and intention. It comes down a lot to intention. Even if you talk about plants and use of plants, and people can use them with poor intentions, and they're just using them to check out and get high. And you might say that is more using it like a drug. Or you could say that people use these as ways to enhance what they're going through, or connect with people, or seek pain relief. And you could say that sounds a lot more like medicine. And the only difference there is the intention with which it was used. And I think there's some truth in that. And ultimately looking at this non-polarized thinking of good, bad, black, white, left, right, which we're also stuck in, and just like the truth is somewhere in the middle, and it often lies with this sense of empowerment and choice and ownership and intention. It frees you a lot from those things. There are certain things we can probably draw harder lines and say, yeah, actually it's hard to make a compelling case that this is a good thing, like masking people and closing beaches and making them take forced medicines that they don't want to take,
gyms and
closing gyms and
blaming
leaving
Joe Rogan
food
for taking ivermectin when we have all this data saying it's good for you, like things like that.
Yeah, so some
taboo
things,
subjects, but
some things get a little crazy, and a certain degree of being a cuckoo woo-woo kind of person in today's world seems to be more and more shifting towards something like truth, and it can get crazy, like you said, and having a curious mind can sometimes be a curse, because you start going like, we don't know anything about nothing, but we do know this, that nature fundamentally holds some of these answers to healing, and that if you do operate from the frame that everything is love, and as long as I can choose to do and be in service of that, then I can't be doing much harm, right? I can't be doing much wrong if my intentions are pure and I'm trying to leave things better than I found it. I'm trying to be a good person. But the one thing you did mention, and we kind of glossed over it, and it's come up a couple times in this conversation, I do think it's a very valuable thing to talk about, is pornography. You work with men. I've had my struggles with it in the past because I was given it as a 13-year-old boy with no education, no restriction on it, and you also have these hormones going like crazy. You said you've had your battles with it, and I'm sure that you encounter men that have battles with it. What do you think at the crux of this issue, and what are some of the things to think about or reconsider when it comes to pornography use in your mind?
Yeah, so in a lot of therapies, they talk about like, what is the trigger mechanism to watching it in the first place. It's always a question to ask for a lot of these things, whether it's like your trigger mechanism for overeating or whatever it may be. This applies to pretty much everything. Halt. So, are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Most of the time, men fall in those categories of being hungry. Maybe they're angry, maybe they're frustrated. They have a little dopamine that quenches it. They're lonely. Lonely is the biggest one I find of all of that, right? Because that's like the core of why you're angry or why you're hungry, or right, it's being lonely. I think a lot of men today are very lonely, or you're tired, you're just exhausted, and you're like, okay, get a little kick up, So I think, dude, my view on like pornography, and at least like jumping right into how you can move away from it. We know how destructive it is for the brain. We don't even need to talk about this stuff. You guys all know this. Everyone knows this. We know how debilitating and shame and guilt inducing it is. So let's just cut into like, how do we get away from this? How do we move forward from this, right? Because what I've done is I've actually connected more with my sexual energy, ironically. And what it's done for me and it's helped me is not saying restrictive things like, don't touch myself, no fap. And basically what we see in our culture today is no fap, hashtag no fap, no fap, no fap, no fap. Is that really the goal though? Is the goal no fap? Is it really just like looking at your penis and acting like it's not there and just saying like, sorry, no, I'm not going to touch it. It's not there. It's not there. You're putting energy towards what you mentioned earlier, which is what you resist persists. So many men are just like going through these programs, the guys that are teaching them to get off porn. And it's like the biggest bullshit ever. And I see all these tweets and I see all these posts saying like, to get off porn, you must like restrict it and set blockers and like all this stuff. And it's like, yes, like get off the porn. But what they also say is just don't touch yourself. How do you get that streak of just no fap? Oh, I'm on day 7. I'm on day 14. And then they relapse. 9 out of 10 times, these guys I talk to, they've gone through these programs and stuff, they relapse. And then they have even more shame and guilt. So everything was just a waste of time. Because what they just did is they restricted themselves so heavily, put this blockade up, acts like on the other side it's not there, when really you can just walk around, you can walk around the wall and it's right there. That's the issue. So it's like, you're not actually getting rid of the problem. You're just putting a mask over it. You know, you're just like saying it's not there, like blinders, like a horse running on a race. So what you can do is integrate your sexual energy. This has been something so bountiful for me, helping all my clients with, and it's very unique. Mantak Chia, you familiar with Mantak Chia?
No.
Have you heard of him? So he's a Taoist, ancient Taoist. He's like in his 70s now. I think he's like 76 or something wild. But he's been teaching for 50 plus years of his life how to cultivate sexual energy and how to do so in a similar format to Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. He talks all about how sexual transmutation is really powerful, right? Convert your sexual energy into work, into purpose, right? Because like right now, I have a lot of testosterone. I'm pretty much horny every day I wake up. I have morning wood. I'm ready to go. Do I start watching porn right away to start my day and just release? No. What I do is I realize I'm a potent man and I'm ready to fucking take the world. I will transmute that energy immediately with the right thoughts and the right actions and habits into my work. Okay, how do I immediately go into work? Or how do I immediately go into shaking my body or practicing Qigong or some energy healing practices? So that's one part of the spectrum, is like transmutation and shifting the sexual energy. Not saying I don't have sexual energy. Another piece of it is, okay, I'm horny right now. I'm feeling this temptation to pull up my phone, look up Pornhub and go into that. Or I could be logical about this. Okay, I'm horny right now. How about I set the phone down, put it in a different room? How about I just like grab some coconut oil and just work this energy a little bit? But my goal isn't to release. That's the key here. Now, this is something that would actually go against a lot of religious friends of mine and things along these lines, because they'd be like, okay, you're touching yourself. That's actually not a Christ-like thing to do. And I would actually say, why would God give us this sexual energy to say, don't touch it, right? Like, I think that's one of those things. It's like saying your dick doesn't exist. It doesn't make any sense. If you're a man, you're a man. And for women, that's a whole other subject, but work your sexual energy if you want to. This is what Mantak teaches in his book, Cultivating Masculine Sexual Energy. And he has many other books you can look into and YouTube channels, but he talks all about just like work your sexual energy. It's totally fine. You know, massage the testicles, slap the balls even a little bit, get some energy down there. You're grounded. You're now in your root. You're not in fear. You're not in this sacral stagnation. You're working this sexual energy. And then after you've had a little bit of sexual pleasure, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 20. And you're like, okay, I'm kind of at that 90% where I could release, but I know in my head, if I do that, I'm going to be shame and guilt. Then stop right there and just like breathe and go do something else immediately, right? Pull your pants up, whatever, do something else immediately. That's when the sexual transmutation may happen. So this is an interesting thing, because I think guys, when I bring this up to them, are like, what, dude? So I can touch myself? I can work this sexual energy? I'm like, of course you can. And you can massage your body if you want. You can put coconut oil all over your body. Like, that's that feminine energy, and it's healing energy you can eventually access. It's like, if you're working the sexual energy enough, you can tap into some really healing frequencies. That's that whole body orgasm energy, which you can tap into over time with practice, just like a meditation. It's a practice, right? So I strongly believe, like, the more you work it, the more you can create that, basically breathing up the spine and orgasming without ejaculation. You might have heard about that and practice that yourself, but it's a lot of stuff we get into with intricacies, but that's like the surface level, like how to work through some of the pornography right there.
I mean, it's a super interesting perspective, man. I think it's really useful, because the kind of forbidden fruit analogy of, yeah, just don't do it, doesn't seem to work. I mean, as soon as you tell yourself you can't do something, you almost want it more, right? And there's just this massive push and pull and a denial that there is something like the sexual urge and the impulse and all of the weirdness that comes with that then, you know, because like you said, the shame, and then nobody feels good after doing that. So we can't just say, okay, stop. Don't do it. Don't look at it, because it's just not realistic. Yeah. And I think it's failing people. So they need different tools. And I think, you know, framing it as an energy, a very potent energy source, like you said, like the creation source of all life, the spark that ignites life itself, is obviously very potent energy. And you have to just ask, are you okay with the way you're spending that? And if that's daily into a tissue over something that doesn't leave you more whole than when you found it, it's probably not the best use of it. And something like this alchemy of the energy of the body and using that, redirecting it, putting it into passion, putting it into work, putting it into a lift, putting it into something while still holding on to that is a high degree of self-mastery. And I think if men can master that, they can probably master anything, honestly, which is really
dude, this is where
empowering for
it's
them.
so it's really empowering, dude. So I will say this too. One thing that's really cool is like if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So your penis is a muscle. It's a fuck ton of muscle down there. When you get engorged and like horny, you're putting a lot of blood flow and energy down, like chi, right? And so if you don't channel that energy, how do you expect to eventually be satisfactory for your partner in the future? How do you expect it to like last longer in the future? If you just like cut off porn and you were just like releasing often, then all of a sudden you just cut it off for months on end or whatever it is, and then you have a partner and like you're going to actually just pick up where you left off. That's exactly what's going to happen because you haven't even worked the energy. You haven't got into that, okay, I'm at this 70, 80% energy, and then you breathe and you hold back. Like that almost edging kind of thing allows you to like be able to satisfy your partner and last longer in bed. And as long as it's cut off from porn, please eliminate that. And it's also tying in some form of semen retention, whether it's like 5 or 7 days, every 5-7 days, or it could be even 2 weeks. A lot of guys report feeling this kind of virility after 7 to 10 days. There's some studies on this where it kicks up and then it kind of just caps right around the 7 to 10 day mark. But that's what I recommend for most guys. Like once a week, if you want to release, go for it. That's fine. Especially if you're a younger buck, you can do it more often. But yeah, if you're starting to approach 30, 40s, 50s, you want to cut back and do a little bit less. But
yeah, it's very interesting again, man. I think sometimes with these kind of conversations, again, like some people are a little more grounded in reality, they might call it, a little more evidence-based. And if they get lost with the woo stuff, it's like, well, if you like testosterone, which I'm sure you do, then the studies show that holding onto your seed for 7 days will spike your testosterone pretty substantially. So we can at least give you that nugget. So at least give yourself a week, fellas. Come on.
There we go.
We can do better.
Yeah.
We can do better.
All right. I got PubMed papers. That'll be influential, you know?
Exactly. I got one more for you. I'm curious about your relationship to raw foods and raw meat in particular. I know you get down with some raw sometimes. So why does CVC Wellness consume raw meat? What's the secrets there?
This is my favorite subject. I'm glad you asked this. So over the past, back in September, I basically had a good friend of mine, and on esoteric Twitter, there's this whole health community on there. And I started really digging into, and I've always been kind of aware of this, but digging into like really deep in the trenches. What does cooking do? What is the point of cooking? Why do we cook? What's the reason? Is it for flavor? Is it for nutrition unlocking? So I went down a wormhole, and this is just about 9-10 months ago. And at this time I was like, okay, so what I've come to realize is that all these animal products, they have these fats, right? And when we add heat to it over 100 degrees, which is over the thermal temperature of the human body, it degrades a lot of these fats or converts them into more of these AGEs and advanced glycation end products. That usually is from like the charred meats and stuff too. And even just cooking egg whites, you may notice like some of it's even kind of got this like charred energy to it, but it's cooked. Now, on top of that, you're entangling proteins in many ways. So that's why the egg white turns white, is because you're actually cooking it and it's entangling the proteins to where they're more coagulated, which turns it white. So instead they were kind of free flowing and you know, the amino acids were floating around. That's why it's like gelatin like, right? It's like watery. So started digging into this, like, okay, that makes sense. And I was also thinking like, okay, Rocky slugged like 20 fucking raw eggs in his movies. And I was just like, okay, this has been around for a very long time. Bodybuilders would do it. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see what this is all about. And then I looked into the work of Aajonus van der Planets. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but he's got some interesting stuff. And I'm not dogmatic with diets. If you actually know me with my nutritional beliefs, I integrate every diet known to man. I believe veganism has a place for some period of time for some type of cellular healing. Maybe it's a week, 2 weeks, whatever. I believe fruitarianism has a period of time to support. I believe carnivore has it, whatever. So I looked into this raw primal diet by Aajonus van der Planets, and he basically cultivated this whole entire in-depth understanding of why we eat raw animal foods for the most part and focusing on that. So I dug deep into the literature on what his books, We Want to Live is one of his books, looked at some of his videos on YouTube, and I was just like, this is super interesting. So I started just eating raw beef. I started getting ground beef. I started getting like some cuts. I started slugging raw eggs more often, got access to some raw dairy, raw butter, raw cheese. And I was like, this is so epic. I'm starting to feel like I already felt amazing, but not cooking my meat, I started feeling like more hydrated. I started feeling more where I don't even drink that much water anymore. It's very strange. Like unless I'm like on creatine or something, I demand a little bit more water, but I get all my water from my hydration water from orange juice and raw milk. And I drink a little bit of water with electrolytes in the days, but I don't drink that much water even now. And I also think it's because I'm hydrated from these fats. The fats that are stabilized are more hydrating, and they're raw. They're not heated up and cooking off the enzymes and cooking off the nutrients. So I've been experimenting with this, man, over the past 10 months, eating almost daily. We could say on average, like 5 pounds of beef, bison, buffalo, elk, deer, venison. I've been eating that about 5 pounds every week for the past, like, I have some fasting routines I come into stuff too, and I cycle off it. But for the most part, for the past 10 months. And on top of that, drinking raw milk, eating the raw butter, eating the raw eggs. And I haven't gotten sick once. So that's something that people are always wondering, like, you get sick, what about E. coli? What about all these viruses and stuff? I'm like, well, I believe in terrain theory, which is a belief system, a little bit a complete antithesis of germ theory, where I believe if my terrain is cleansed and healed and healthy, it's not going to get sick from any virus or any bacteria. And so I've been doing this for the past 10 months as like a beta test. And now I'm at the point where I'm open to sharing it with people because I've actually tested it. I didn't share it for 6 months up until recently, because I just didn't want my clients to get ideas and stuff. And like, I just wanted to test it. Now I'm actually fulfilled enough to say, hey, this is actually something I can teach you how to eat, because I'm noticing the health benefits myself and it seems pretty legit. So that's where I've been with all this, man. It's been pretty interesting.
It is. It's super interesting. The Vonderplitz guy, sorry if I got his pronunciation, fascinating. And I know there's a lot of people, there's the raw meat experiment guy on Instagram that posts a video. Yeah, the guy's eating chicken and pork and all kinds. He's like day 600, not dead yet. And it's just pretty wild. Again, it's another one of these things that challenges these conventionally held beliefs. And I think it's a good thing to do that. I think it's okay to go against the grain, ask the question, and more than anything else, like you said, run the experiment. See what happens. If you've now got that, you've got this N of one data, and, N of many is some form of data. It might not be in PubMed, and you might not get, the validation from the scientific community that's going to say, oh, this is a great idea, but you might feel it, and feeling is believing. And I think that's really interesting. And in particular, these days, when I look at red meat, I do get this urge to just tuck in, I don't need to necessarily throw it. So I've been a raw milk advocate and, obviously raw oysters and things like that for a long time, but, thinking about diving into a little bit of an experiment myself. So just stay tuned and, just think about these things a little bit differently. So, man, I appreciate your perspective on a lot of things. It's very refreshing. It's very cool to see somebody just genuinely curious about things, pushing back against things, trying to form their own opinions in a world where we are told what to think, what to say, what to do, who to be. And I think that's why people are really drawn to you. And I think that's why you grow. And I think that's why you're having impact. So I appreciate everything that you shared today. And I would love to just give you the floor to have any closing thoughts, and also tell people where they can go to check out what you're up to and your retreats and your coaching and all of that stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. It's been awesome, Steve, and just like learning from you too, and having some of these bounce back conversations. I hope you guys got some benefit from it. I love geeking out on this stuff. And yeah, ultimately takeaways, man. I'd say just like simple living. Go back to simple, go back to natural living, whatever that looks for you. This could be what we talked about, microdosing nature on the daily. It could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then macrodosing once a week. I like to say that's some of the philosophies I teach my clients is you don't necessarily need to go in nature all the time, immerse yourself. It's like, just do your best, microdose it 10 minutes every day, get some sun, get ground barefoot, then macrodose on the weekend, spend a whole day off. You got time to do this for yourself. And also get out of the mindset of time management, get into the idea of energy management. You're not managing time. We all have 24 hours in a day. It's how do you manage your energy? Why are some of the most successful people in the world 22, and some of the, the sickest people are, up in their 50s and 60s? It's because they didn't manage their time right? Obviously, that 22-year-old, if they're successful now in all aspects of life, it goes to show that 40-year difference doesn't mean anything. It's not time. It's energy. How much can you condense with passion? So go back to that idea of energy management. Yeah, you can reach me on all platforms at CVC Wellness. You can go to cvcwellness.com, see some of my offerings. I have spots open for one-on-one coaching pretty much throughout the year, supporting you with nutrition, with fitness, a lot of these mindset strategies. As I prefaced a little bit earlier too, I'm helping a lot of content creators. If you're wanting to be an aspiring coach and build some awesome content, and you want to simultaneously heal your life as much as possible through holistic living, I have an awesome private community called Vital Camp. You can join on that. It's a subscription-based community. It's really epic. Would love to have you join at Vital Camp. We're all about dancing around the campfire, around creating more for other people, because it's not about consuming, right? So that's something I have open right now. And yeah, the Interfit program is something that's really big with the group coaching as well. So if you're a man, you're wanting to have some more fortitude with your masculinity and, really moving forward with all these facets of health, we have group coaching as well. And it's a lot of fun doing this virtual coaching. So, and lastly, I know we were talking about this. I know you have offerings with retreats and stuff too. We're blowing up some retreats. So in person, would love to have a kumbaya and have some fun dancing and talking about health, consciousness, conspiracies, all the fun things. Welcome to join some of those too. And you can just DM me on all these platforms to connect. So I appreciate it, man. That's all I got going on. A lot of stuff.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of stuff that seems like it's very in alignment for you and it's trying to add to the world. And that's all we can do, right? So there you have it. Christian Van Camp, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you next week. Stay radical. Peace out. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.